Welcome to Goobertown Hobbies. My name is Brent. Plastic miniatures are mass-produced, and that means there are lots of duplicates out there in the world. As you're building your collection, you may end up with twins or triplets or beyond. Today we're exploring the most effective ways to take some duplicate monopose minis and make them look like something other than clones. We've got some simple and straightforward conversion strategies. We can make these copies into delightful new characters. Plastic models have been getting better and better and better. Unfortunately, a lot of the best miniatures are monopose these days. Check this out. Here are 4 generations of Chaos Warriors from Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar. The earliest plastics often had a single sculpt. I hope you like this look for Chaos Warriors, because this is what you're getting. Later on, they became modular and customizable. In this generation, you could mix and match arms, torsos, legs, and heads. I seem to have misplaced the heads. Anyway, at the waist, you could give them a bit of a twist if you wanted to. The arms attached to the shoulder, and the shoulder could be rotated through a decently wide range of reasonable-looking poses. Take note of what different joints can do to the silhouette of a model. The outline of the figure is going to be critical for effective conversions. Okay, the next generation of Chaos Warriors was split front and back, so the torso and the legs were fused. But there were a ton of options for the heads, arms, and weapons. These models could dual-wield melee weapons, or trade one weapon for a shield, or if you bought the resin upgrade, they could hold big double-handed power weapons. The arms attach at the elbow. This is a ball joint, and it works at a bunch of different angles. We can bend the elbow, and we can mimic some wrist mobility. The way they carry their sword has a big effect on the look and the feel of these characters. The necks are also a ball joint, so we could make them look in different directions. Now let's look at some modern minis. These are some of my favorite Games Workshop models ever. They're detailed, they have dynamic poses, and they're fun to paint. These came from a Start Collecting box that had new knights, new warriors, and a Chaos Lord on Karkadrak. This kit had some head options, but everything else could only be built in a single way. Just look at these bits. This cloak is connected to a shield arm. This cloak is connected to a sword arm. This cloak has an axe arm with a shield slung across the back. This cloak has 2 arms. This cloak has no arms. This torso has 2 legs. This torso is missing 1 leg. This torso is missing the other leg. This model was built from 3 pieces: front, back, and head. Meanwhile, this model was 6 pieces, and I have no idea where any of those joints are. On the Chaos Knight kit, this bit includes the left shoulder, the chest, the right knee, the stirrup, and the toe of the right boot. I think you get the idea. Modern model kits are precisely keyed. These minis go together in exactly one way, and they're not made for mixing and matching. On the other hand, the pieces all fit together nicely. The joints and even some of the mold lines are well disguised. These models are so good that I wanted to get a whole bunch of them. The only problem is that the second batch of 10 are gonna be twins with the first batch. Side note, more recently, another kit of 10 Chaos Warriors has been released, and those have easier weapon swaps. But for a few years, those monopose warriors from the Start Collecting box were all that we had to work with. Actually, between those 2 releases, there was a new warband for Warhammer Underworlds. That little box had 3 new poses for warriors, and I was unreasonably excited to go from 10 different poses to 13 different poses. That brings us back to the heart of the matter. How do we make duplicates look unique? The focus of this video is on simple, effective changes. There are lots of great resources out there about how to do complex conversions, but we're going to focus on the low-hanging fruit. Primarily, we're looking at heads, shoulders, wrists, and weapons, and sometimes elbows. These are easy modifications that can change the silhouette of the model and make a big difference. I built my first 10 Chaos Warriors according to the instruction manual. For the next 10, I started making conversions. I had the originals all out for reference as I was doing the surgery. I applied some disguises to that second batch of 10, and I got them all painted. Now let's take a look. We're starting with the least effective and working towards the good stuff. The unmodified model is on the left, and the conversion is on the right. This is a head swap and a shield swap. The silhouette hasn't changed though, and these twins aren't fooling anyone. This is a head swap and a weapon swap. The joint is just below the hilt of the sword. Switching a sword in for the Morningstar changes the outline of the Mini a bit, so it's a bit more effective. Now here is a weapon swap, a head swap, and a shield swap. With this model kit, it actually takes a bit of work to switch the shield arms, but the shield swap has the least impact. The design on these shields is quite different, but our eyes are going to see the overall shape of the figure and the head before we go looking for details on individual components. Here's another pair with 3 changes: the head, the weapon, and the shield. Again, changing the design on the shield is less effective than the head and the weapon. This guy has larger horns on his helmet, and that is some useful misdirection. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. This is another head, shield, and weapon swap, but this time we're rotating the neck. One guy is looking to the left, and one guy is looking to the right. It does make a difference. Our brain notices. Now here we have a different head and a different shield, but the only thing we see is the banner. The joints are above and below the fist of the weapon hand. Adding a massive banner will disguise almost any miniature, and it's basically cheating. Here's an example where I swapped one conspicuous offhand item for another. In some ways, this is the model from the set that must be modified. Having a twin is one thing, but if you and your twin go and find another pair of twins, and you take their heads and you each carry around one of the heads, well, it's weird and it's noticeable. In this case, I replaced the severed head with a horn, swapped the weapon, and gave the model a helmetless head that'll be more compatible with tooting a horn. Now we're getting to the good stuff. Behold, a simple wrist rotation. A cut was made above the cuff of the glove, the wrist was rotated 90 degrees, and I glued it back together. It's the same sword, but the character is using it in a new defensive stance. This conversion has a big impact on the silhouette, so my brain doesn't recognize these two models as twins. Okay, here's an even better one. The original model just made a downward chop with an axe, but the new model is winding up a massive uppercut with his hammer. The changes are at the neck and the wrist of the weapon arm. Each head is looking in the direction of the swing. One is looking down, and one is looking up. At the wrist, the joint is just above the cuff of the glove. The rotation of that wrist changes the intent of the character and the silhouette of the model. My conversion is distinct from the original, and I think it might even be better. And here's my personal favorite. I changed the head, the shield, and the angle of the wrist. The original model is charging with his sword in the air, and the conversion is lunging and stabbing with the same sword. Again, the key change is a cut at the wrist and a 90-degree rotation. I love the new pose of stabbing out over the shield. It seems like something from the movie Troy or 300 or Gladiator or something like that. I couldn't stop at just 20 Warriors of Chaos. I've got more on the sprue, and I bought another set off of eBay that had already been assembled by somebody according to the instruction manual. This is fine. It's gonna be harder if we want to swap heads and shields, but most of the other conversions would require cutting into a fully assembled model anyway. Let's take an intermission to talk about the important topic of shoulders. This is another joint that can make a huge impact on the silhouette of a model and the intention of the character. I ended up with 4 copies of these Indomitus Marines. They assemble in some very specific ways, but there's an opportunity for some straightforward conversions at the shoulder joint. These pins make assembly easy, but they massively restrict our options. If we cut the pins off, we're left with a classic flat interface between the torso and the shoulder. Just like those plastic Chaos Warriors from the 90s, this type of joint gives us an opportunity to mix and match the arms and change the angle at the shoulder joint. The heads are also keyed to have a specific facing. If we cut that triangular pin off, we're left with a standard ball and socket joint, and we have a lot more options. By the way, the heads from that Chaos kit are also keyed to look in a single direction. The good news is that it's easy to clip that nub and point the head in whatever direction you want. I have 4 copies of this set of legs and torso, but I've given myself some flexibility at the neck and especially the shoulders. As always, mixing up the outline of the Mini has a big impact, and now these troops are effectively disguised. Here's another set of 4 with identical torsos and legs, but you mix these into an army and they'll be pretty hard to spot. Here's another set of 4. The more dynamic those legs are, the more distinctive they are, but I'm happy with these quick and easy conversions. These quadruplets are just different enough to hide in a crowd. And here's one more set of 4. These models from starter sets are some of the cheapest ways to build a collection, and if you're willing to do just a bit of work, you can make them look more modular and unique than they really are. Okay, enough of all these Space Marines. Let's get back to Warriors of Chaos. Thousands upon thousands of this miniature have been produced. Holding that sword out at exactly that angle makes him easy to spot, so let's change him up a bit. We're looking for natural places to make a cut. It's easiest to hide modifications at the borders between 2 different materials. Above or below the vambraces are both good possibilities. I used a saw to cut along the upper edge of the bracer near the elbow. Then I did just a bit of cleanup with a sanding stick. I want a flat edge on both sides of the cut so that we can experiment with some rotation at this joint. Of course, an elbow doesn't rotate quite like this, but we can assume that the shoulder and the wrist are compensating. Both of those joints are hidden behind armor, so our brain can kind of infer what the shoulder, elbow, and wrist are all up to, and it all looks natural enough. I also took him off of that hero rock. Standing on exactly the same plastic rock makes clone miniatures way too obvious. I put him on a flat base, and that has the effect of rotating the whole model clockwise by a few degrees. The feet aren't both perfectly flat on the ground, but that's okay. I eventually found a pose with the sword tip pointing down that I really liked, and I got it glued in place. I find that plastic glue works great with the thickness of these arms, no pinning required. Now let's work on the head. I used sharp clippers to remove both of the horns. Clippers pinch the plastic as they cut, but sharp clippers do an okay job at leaving at least one flat edge. I shortened the horns a bit, I rotated them forward, and I reattached them. Of course, I could have just used a different head, but on this model, I want to see what I can do without using any outside bits. I removed the tassel from the pommel of the sword. It only made sense in the new location if there was a strong wind blowing or the warrior was moving really fast. It is a nice bit though, so I considered adding it to the helmet. This could be a cool option, and it would also work if I removed the horns entirely. In the end, I decided not to use the tassel. I might have tried it somewhere else, but I dropped the bit and lost it, and that's okay too. I also decided to remove all the raised details from the shield. There's filigree and a chain and even a severed hand hanging from it. If you look at the model for a second or two, all of that stuff becomes pretty distinctive. I wanted to see what it would look like if I chopped and filed everything off. I could glue new stuff to the shield, or I could use it as a blank canvas to do some freehand. Anyway, here's the conversion, and I think it looks great. I had fun painting him too. The new color tricks the eye for a microsecond, but the most important changes are the ones that alter the silhouette. The angle of the sword is the most important, followed by the angle of the horns, and getting rid of the hero rock that he had his foot on. I didn't use any new bits for this conversion, and he turned out great. Ideally though, I like to have a variety of bits on hand. These can be extra pieces from the original model set, or pieces from other kits. Okay, next up I want to try doing a full shoulder transplant. The shoulder is a very useful joint for conversions, but on these models it's hard to get to because of the pauldrons and the cloaks. On the upside, if we can get to the shoulder, all that armor is going to hide the new joint and make it look more natural. Reaching the shoulder required a lot of cutting, and I even used a drill to burrow up in there. This seems like a more risky operation. If this doesn't work, the model may become an amputee, but that could be cool too. I had a few possible sources for new arms. The old plastic Chaos Knight kit has some extra right arms, but those are a bit too beefy. The newer, more modular Chaos Warriors also have a couple of extra arms, and those turned out to be a great fit. The nice thing about these is that the wrist was keyed to fit with all of the weapons from that set. I eventually chose a spiky beat stick because it fit with the spiky shield and the spiky thigh armor. I ended up only changing the weapon arm on this model. It alters the silhouette enough to be distinct, and I love the new look. The reason that I opted to cut the arm higher up on the model is because of the way the original is holding the weapon. The haft is fused with the forearm, which makes it harder to do a wrist rotation or even an elbow rotation. I was able to save this bit from the elbow down though, so let's see if we can put it to good use. I love all of these Chaos Warriors, but this one is the runt of the litter. If I played the game, he'd be the first casualty that I removed. Dumb helmet, dumb weapon, dumb hero rock. I started by removing the rock. Then I YOLO'd and I cut his arm off at the elbow. Let's see if the bit from the previous warrior will fit. I wasn't 100% sure that this would work, but sometimes you just gotta try it. I always have somewhat of a backup plan. If this elbow doesn't work out, I could do another shoulder transplant. Or, as a worst case scenario, I could give him a sword or an axe as a prosthetic arm. That'd be pretty cool. Luckily, the simple trade did work. In the new pose, the left and the right arms are both spread out wide, and there's a come at me bro kinda energy here. I chopped off the stupid helmet so that we could have a head that matches the mood. Oh yes, this will do nicely. Since we're doing a head swap, we can change the direction that he's looking, and this has a big impact. Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here? Look at this. We've got a Spaniard gladiator on our hands. Holding a weapon above the head or out to the side are both distinctive. It's easy to spot doubles with these poses, so we might as well convert the silly-looking duplicates into some awesome new characters. Speaking of distinctive characters, we've got to deal with this guy with a severed head. We can't have twins finding other twins and then walking around with duplicate severed heads. We can't have it. So first, we're cutting off the trophy head. The weapon held out to the side also needs to go. Now, closed fists have a lot of potential. We can glue almost any weapon or item onto them. Ultimately, I just transferred the axe from the right hand to the left hand. The cross-section of the haft of this weapon is relatively small, and it's a more delicate connection than a lot of the other conversions that we've done today. We could drill holes and use a thin bit of metal to pin them, but in this case, I think we can trust in the glue to hold things together. For a new right-hand object, we could put that severed head back, and that would be pretty stupid and pretty funny. I couldn't bring myself to do it though. Instead, I grabbed a different head. These guys are twins. They have similar equipment and similar interests. They each found a unique head to carry around with them. You can use conversions to tell whatever story you want. I guess these two are kinda like the Salamanca twins from Breaking Bad. They wear different color suits in the same style, and they travel around together scaring the heck out of people. Conversions don't have to be difficult, but they open up a tremendous amount of room for storytelling. We didn't use any putty or wireframes in this video, it was all simple cuts and twists and swaps. As you're looking for easy and effective conversions, keep in mind how important the silhouette of the model is. Sometimes changing the angle of a weapon is all it takes to make a duplicate look like a distinct new model. Weapons, wrists, shoulders, and heads are all prime candidates for modification. Sometimes elbows are viable too. Legs are harder to modify, and they have less effect on the overall appearance of the model. Remember though, if your model has a leg propped up on a plastic rock, well, that's an invitation to have him stand on something new. These examples are just the beginning. As you're playing around with different bits and exploring the possibilities, you may find yourself in unexpected places. Inspiration will strike, you've just got to give it a chance. You can do this. You have everything you need to make some new and delightful characters. Well, I guess that's all for today. Thanks so much for watching.